Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm actually so excited about this and I'm not gonna go on forever. Let's get right into it. My name is Lashana and I love to read and watch shows and take care of my health, and so that's the kind of content I want to create. I also have a thing for hobbies, but reading is my primary and then watching shows. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to do a breakdown and a quick analysis, an analysis if you will, a dissertation thesis on the Testaments. I watched The Handmaid's Tale, right? And then I went straight into the Testaments because I could not wait. I could not put that aside. I just needed to know what was up. I love a good dystopian. I've read and watched all the dystopians we did growing up, and I never read or watched this, so I decided to start with watching it. I do know that the show differs a lot from the books, so I watched with that in mind. I have not read it yet, but I can't wait to. But when I say the Testaments hit so hard for me, I don't even know. So the first episode is called Precious Flowers, and basically the theme of it is flowers, right? And it's like, I love this kind of stuff because I'm like, the writing is just so good because the theme of the show is flowers, and we get introduced to one main character who goes by the name of Daisy, and then we get an analogy in the middle that I'm gonna come back to later about daisies and black-eyed Susans. It's so good. Anyways, so the episode starts off, I have everything written down, so if you see me glancing down, that's why. The episode starts off with some details about what you're going to be watching. It basically tells you that Gilead was a regime that took over the country we know as America for a time. And it was once a totalitarian regime, and it basically said that these women, the women who were part of the society, were subject to very gruesome treatments, gruesome acts of violence. Even the women who were quote-unquote elite, even the ones who were like the daughters of the commanders who were the ruling class in the society, were subject to these high levels of violence of all different sorts. And then it goes on to say that these are the women that ended up changing the course of history. And I was like, okay, so it's letting you know right off the bat, this is in the past and these are their stories. And I love that. I love that it didn't make it like a big reveal. Oh my god, Gilead is going down. We already know, we're comforted by the fact that Gilead is going to fall, and this is just the survivors or the ones who were playing an active role in that falling, telling you their story. That was what Handmaid's Tale was, and that's what the Testament is, right? I love that. So I love the way the episode itself starts off with a dollhouse. And the way we see the dollhouse, we don't come up to the real house and then go inside the real house and then see the girl and then the dollhouse. We start off going straight through the dollhouse, and we kind of see the main character Agnes through the lens of the dollhouse and the doll window. And basically that is imagery for letting you know that this entire regime is like a dollhouse, and the commanders are the ones who are playing, and they're basically playing with people's lives as if they're dolls, they're toys to be played with, you know what I mean? They really do be doing anything they feel like. And in the same way you make up rules and stuff for your dolls and treat your dolls any old way and throw them down when you're done, and then go on and live your life despite what you just said to your dolls, that's the same way the commanders behave. Oh, let me stop right here. If you have not read, watched, or anything The Handmaid's Tale or the Testament, I encourage you to do so before watching this video because it is spoiler heavy, or will be. I mean, episode 1 doesn't contain a lot of spoilers, but I might go off on a tangent, and I'll try not to so that I don't spoil Handmaid's Tale. But I want you to get the gist, and I want you to get excited about watching it. So let's go. Yeah, so this ruling class shaping the lives of people the way they see fit, as if they're dolls. You know what I mean? And then the montage of Agnes getting ready and what she's telling us to prepare us for the story she's about to tell about her not being able to tell time or read a calendar to know what day it is. That whole montage is just very telling. It shows how tightly wound these women are into a certain box. We know that women come in mentally all shapes and sizes, as in there are women that think like this and women that think like that and like that. There's different trains of thought, and they're all just fit into this one box that says this is what you need to be and nothing else. They can't even read because they don't want them to expand their minds at all. So not even a calendar, and she tells us you could lose a finger. You could lose a finger for that. So she has to figure out other ways to mark time and to tell time, but she can't read time or like read a calendar or anything like that. And that just tells you the depth of it. So we're going through the montage, and she's explaining to you the members of the house, which we would have an understanding of if you watched Handmaid's Tale, where you have the Marthas, who are basically the women who clean the house and everything like that. She's a plum. You have her dad, Commander Mackenzie, and you have, well, you in some households that don't have children, you'll find a handmaid, but this household didn't have a handmaid. She doesn't even have a handmaid's doll, baby. Anyways, so yeah, I don't know why I got so excited about that, but like the fact that they don't have a doll for handmaids is sus, because they're hiding such a large part of their society from their daughter. I mean, I think most commanders' families don't have a handmaid because they have no interest in that. They have no interest in having more kids with another person. They want to try to have kids with each other. You know what I mean? So they don't participate in that aspect of society, even though it still exists. But it is for like, we're like in the upper class now with Agnes, and handmaids are for like the middle class, if that makes sense. And then of course those in the lower class they don't even live, they're not a part of the society per se. They are called econo men, econo women, econo people. They're just forced to live a certain way and live in little apartments, and that's it, pretty much. So they don't, we're echelons up. We're hanging with Agnes now, and we also start to see how they start to like indoctrinate the girls who were not around, or like never have sense, or like weren't old enough to understand anything before Gilead. How they indoctrinate them into thinking that anyone that does not believe in the way they live and their way of life, and anyone that tries to get back their kids or try to go against what Gilead stands for, which is lots of crimes against humanity, they are heretics and they're the enemy. And that's what the girls are taught to believe. They're not taught that people have differences of views and opinions and they should respect that. They're taught that they're sinners and they're heretics, and they're better than them. You know what I mean? And so straight after the getting ready montage, we go right into a scene where we start to see the similarities between Agnes and June. Because if you watch The Handmaid's Tale, you'll see that June was a kind of person who, yes, she has these rules, and yes, she knows the rules, but you can see her humanity coming out. You can see, you know, that human beings are nuanced. They're not robots. And you see the nuance in her personality coming out, even though other handmaids take on this kind of robotic persona just for survival, just to get through this regime. That was never June. And June said, never that. Never that. Never that. One thing I'm gonna have is a personality. Anyways, so we see that in Agnes, and basically they're in like this bus and they're going to a field trip. and she sits on the bus, and apparently they're not, I think they're not supposed to look outside, but she was looking at this guardian. This guardian was looking at her all lustfully, and she was looking at him kind of scared. And the bus is like a plum colored bus, and it had curtains, and she like peeked out the curtain, and then an aunt turned and looked at her like, what you doing, girl? And she kind of just like looked like she wasn't doing anything until the aunt looked away, and she looked again, and then she turned to this girl behind her and smiled at her because they had like a little inner thing. And that same girl eventually became somewhat of an antagonist for Agnes and her friends, but we'll look at that in basically a later video when we talk about the other episodes. But I found that interesting that they had that smiling moment before everything that was about to happen happened. So they indoctrinate them, so they take them on this field trip, and the field trip basically takes them to this area where they can play. And before they get to the area where they can play, one of the nuances I was talking about earlier with June and Agnes, so whoa, Agnes has a Paula doll, and she uses it to show acts of rebellion. So she did not like the way Paula was talking to her at breakfast. I didn't like it either, girl. She didn't like the way Paula was talking to her at breakfast, so there was a scene where she put the doll's head under one of the doors in the dollhouse and smashed it. She pretends like when she's playing, she pretends like she's putting Paula behind a room in the dollhouse and locking the door, and all her plum dolls sat outside laughing away while Paula's inside crying, trying to get out. And these are the things that she shows her expressiveness and her acts of rebellion against the things that she thinks are oppressive to her personally, even though she does not understand the level of oppression she's under yet. You can see that she has a lot of fight in her, and we have the first Mrs. Mackenzie to thank for that, because the first Mrs. Mackenzie is the one who showed her love, allowed her to express, and just allowed her to be a little bit free and feel more comfortable. And so she has that fight in her because of that. And of course, in The Handmaid's Tale, we get a lot of the first Mrs. Mackenzie and her interactions with June, and we see kind of that she cares. She does care about Agnes, even though the way they got this child is through kidnapping, which can never be right, you know what I mean? Anyways, moving on. So now they're at this field trip and they're playing, and the playing really stood out to me because it really showed how they're kids and the aunts know that these are children, and yes, they're hitting puberty, right? They're getting their first periods. That's times when they should be playing still. That's times when they should be now taught how to socialize with each other with these things in mind. They should be taught what's happening to their bodies and what changes to expect going forward, and even what to expect from the opposite sex. But instead, what they're taught is that once they get their first period, it's time for marriage. It's time for marriage. And they're playing, and some of these girls already got their period. BT dubs. So we have, or did they take the girls who have not gotten their periods yet to play? Anyways, they're playing on this field trip, and then they get taken to like an area where they have hangings or whatever, salvagings as they call them, and basically they're showing these people, and we see our queen Rowan. I don't know if you guys know Rowan from Disney Channel, but she's one of the girls. Her name is Shunammite, and we see them being asked like, what do you think these men did to get hung? And they're like, I don't know. And Shunammite is like, oh, they raped and they're rapists, and she's very raw and she's making everyone uncomfortable. You can see this, the aunts are uncomfortable, the other girls are uncomfortable. Shunammite is just raw, and we're like, okay, this is the eager one, this is the teacher's pet kind of, you know, like forward, very confident, but also very forward, aggressive. She wants this more than anyone else kind of thing. And that just goes to how they're raised. But they're being taught that, you know, these men are being hung for this violent act against women. But then they're being taught that the reason is because the girl that they did it to she was forward and she threw herself at them. And we know that in this society that they're living in called Gilead, you don't have to do anything for you to be blamed as a woman. So they're just being taught that women are the reason for all the violent acts against men, to the point where Agnes said that what Agnes got from it is that as a woman she is dangerous, and without women these men are perfectly fine. That's what she's learning, that without her these men are perfectly good men, and as soon as women enter the picture they're terrible, awful human beings, and so it's women's fault. Yeah, we see the problems there. We see how problematic that is, right? She even recounts a time where she was little and she was a pink, and we know that pinks are kids, pinks are little, and she smiled at a boy, and the aunts had her stand in the cafeteria holding the sign slut for 2 days. 2 days. June wanted her kid, and y'all are having her standing there in the damn cafeteria holding a slut sign as a child. And we don't even know if she ate those 2 days. She probably didn't eat, knowing how Gilead does for those 2 days. She's like, I wonder what they would do over a kiss. And we kind of later on, I'm just realizing that we later on in that episode get a sense of what they do for even less than a kiss. So in a way her question gets answered, right? So all of that happens, and we meet Shunammite and everything like that, and now they're getting back to school. And then in the scene where Shunammite is saying these men did this to women and that's why they're hanging, it's Aunt Vidala that is teaching them this lesson about their wiles being the problem or whatever. And you can see the vacancy behind Aunt Vidala's eyes, like she's disassociated from this job that she has to do, and she basically just has to do this to survive. She just has to do this so that she doesn't get got, because she has to teach the ideology to the young ones. That is what she agreed to do, so that they did not kill her. And you could see that she checked out so that she could check into survival mode. And a lot of the aunts do this. They don't do these things because they want to do them or because they enjoy them. They do them because that is their purpose in the society, and that is the only use that they have, and they have to be able to do it to be kept alive. That's the kind of society we're dealing with here. And that scene where she was teaching them really showed me that vacancy in her eyes. Also in the beginning we had 2 guardians standing out, and I like how this show brings out main characters without introducing them. So you don't just get thrown and say this is that person. You will notice the characters before they're introduced because they're main characters. So we start off with Agnes because she's telling the story. When we pass the guardians, 2 of the guardians who form a major plot points are brought to the fore with what they're doing and saying. One of them says, good morning, Agnes, or blessed day, Agnes. None of the other guardians said that. And the other one was like looking at her with lustful eyes. And those 2 things are significant going forward. And then also when they get to school and we get introduced to the Pearl Girls, and we hear one specific Pearl Girl praying, your attention is brought to her immediately. We later realize that that is Daisy, and that is the second main character, right? She carries the story a third of the way, right? And so I love that the show does that. I think that's like a really good way to introduce characters without like, it's a way to have a nice adult show that you can lean into and you know, without telling you everything. The show also does a good job of like teaching you about the society while telling the story. So the outfit that Agnes is wearing, she had a different outfit, she had a different style, not color but style, when the first Mrs. Mackenzie was around, and now that there's a new Mrs. Mackenzie, Paula, the style has changed. She don't like it, but the style has changed. We then learned that the wives are the ones who inform the style that the family wears, whether it is the Marthas, the handmaids, the daughters or the children, or they themselves. The cut of the fabric, not the color at all. Each color is set, but like the cut of the fabric, the wives determine. And so you can, what's her name, Agnes is like, I don't like it because Paula don't got no taste. Even God knows Paula doesn't have any taste. And then kind of we learn about now how Gilead treats young girls in terms of friendships. They're taught that they cannot have a best friend, that one-on-one friendships lead to secrets, and secrets lead to immorality. So they're just dividing them from the start. They're just teaching them that they can't lean on each other because they are going to let each other down by leading them into immorality, because their whole thing is holiness and morality and being good and being good stewards and being godly and whatever. And so they'll tell them everything to say that makes you ungodly, that they use the Bible to control them, basically. Not that women can read the Bible, so they don't even have to use the Bible. They just have to tell them this is what it is, because women aren't allowed to read, so they won't know the difference. Anyways, so we know Agnes is June's daughter, so she's gonna rebel. So Agnes goes on ahead and has herself a best friend. She goes on ahead and have herself a best friend. Okay, she's not gonna let them tell her how to run her social life. And like, I like that about her from the jump, that she's saying all these rules, but you're seeing that she's breaking all these rules. That's pretty cool. When we get introduced to the Pearl Girls, we start to see that not only is the division showed among the Plums, or the girls themselves that have grown up in Gilead, but the division is also shown from Pearl Girls to Plums. So even though these Pearl Girls are converts from other countries or whatever, when they're brought over, they're taught, I don't know how they're taught this, but they're somehow taught to basically tell on all the girls, or they are taught to confess everything to gain acceptance, and as a result they be telling on the Plums, and the Plums don't like that because they're like, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? They even tell on themselves, each other. And that's just how hard they fight for acceptance. And that is one seed that Fred and Serena sowed, child. Fred and Serena from The Handmaid's Tale sowed a seed and gained some fans for Gilead, and we're seeing the effects of that, where they're able to go and inspire and convert other people and get people to move to the country. Crazy work. And they don't just take anybody. There has to be young girls, because they have to be fertile. There has to be a good chance that they can be fertile. So that's how the Pearl Girls come to be. And they have to wear white. And Daisy wears a pearl piercing right here that I'm actually like, oh, because I used to have a piercing right here and I don't have it anymore, but like when I saw it, I'm like, that's so cute. Anyways, but when I saw the Pearl Girls, it answered a lot of questions as it relates to where Gilead was going, because obviously you only have so many people in the country. You have such a high mortality rate because you be just killing everybody for any old reason. People are leaving. What are they doing about population growth? And not just have babies, but also we know that you need more people for society to grow. And so they answer the question as to what they're doing, which is they're pulling out feelers, and they are recruiting people from other countries. And I don't know if all the girls came there of their own free will, but all the girls that are there come from other places. The Pearl Girls, that is. And there's quite a few of them. And then they transition into like a fabric making or fabrication class. And that was crazy because these girls were working on looms. Don't start. The fabrication classes are crazy. They're doing embroidery. They're working on a loom. They're making fabric from scratch. Like, they're doing everything with fabric. They're doing lace work. What are they not doing, right? And then we zoom into one girl, Hilda, and Hilda's a sweetie. Hilda is doing some embroidery, and one of the aunts Aunt Este. It's like, very good, Hilda, I love your daisies. And this is before we meet Daisy officially, by the way. I love your daisies. And Hilda's, thank you, Aunt Este, but actually these aren't daisies, these are Black-Eyed Susan. But before we get to focus on, she said these aren't daisies, these are Black-Eyed Susans, Aunt Este stops her and says, should you be thanking me? Because apparently they should not be saying thank you to the aunts. They should say thanks. They should be saying thanks be to God, or like praise be his mercy for sewing and thread and paper and cloth and whatever, right? And so she corrects her in that way, and she says, oh, I'm so sorry, thanks be to, and she says what she's supposed to say, whatever, stumbles over it, and she said, do you forgive me? And she's like, I forgive you, but next time be careful around like Aunt Vidala. And basically you get to see like a mirror, because we know that Aunt Vidala is not doing what she's doing because she wants to do it, because she wants to be mean. She's just doing what she thinks she needs to do to survive, which is to do what she's told, which is to teach these girls this doctrine and keep them in line. While Aunt Este is doing that, and her point person is Aunt Vidala. So Este and are like Aunt Vidala and Aunt Lydia and the state, where each person is just doing what they think the upper person thinks they should be doing in order to survive. Because I'm sure Aunt Este's go-to is that if this girl's caught doing this, she's gonna get in so much trouble, and it could make or break the rest of their lives, the amount of trouble they get into in these schools, because it leans into whether or not they'll be given a good husband or not, you know what I mean? And there's a whole class system where the husbands are concerned, so there's that as well. So yeah, she does that, and then she winks and then she moves on. Right at that point, another aunt comes in and gets Agnes, and this is where I love the way they set this up, because then they reintroduce Aunt Lydia fresh as a daisy, and she's talking about her statue, and she's saying, do you know why I have a statue? And Agnes is like, to keep looking over us. And she's like, dead people have statues, so I've been petrified prematurely. And that is just like one of few things. It's either foreshadowing her death, or it's kind of giving her a symbolism of like a Trojan horse, where she has like a gift statue, but she's actually going to be responsible or help be responsible for Gilead's demise. You know what I mean? So that statue is very telling of the character that Aunt Lydia is supposed to be, which is the one that is on the inside while actually working for the outside. Do you know what I mean? Just like Trojan horse kind of thing. And so I think that's what that is. But then another thing is that right as Hilda is saying, this is not, I'm not embroidering a daisy, this is actually a Black-Eyed Susan, and she gets cut off. I think the reason Aunt Este cut her off is because Black-Eyed Susans aren't as acceptable as daisies. I don't know, but I might be reaching there. But anyways, the next thing is not a reach. We get introduced to Daisy, because that's why Lydia wanted Agnes, so she could give her Daisy and tell her to be her shepherdess, because she might be becoming a plum very soon. And so we get introduced to Daisy, but then we just had a scene where someone was talking about daisies and saying, this is not, the person's like, this is not a daisy, this is a Black-Eyed Susan. And basically I think that's also symbolism to say that Daisy is not who you think she is in the beginning at first. There's a lot more to her. Like, you look at her at a glance and you think that's Daisy, and that's actually Black-Eyed Susan. No, like, but she's actually a double agent. She's actually the Black-Eyed Susan among the daisies, if that makes sense. And daisies and Black-Eyed Susans look very similar, but they differ in color, and a lot of people mistake them. And I just love the symbolism there, and the fact that the episode name is Precious Flowers, and we meet one of the most precious flowers of all, which is Daisy. And she's precious because of her role and what she means for these girls, and we discussed it later on because I love what she does. But yeah. Oh, one other thought I had was that the statue could be symbolic up Aunt Lydia. My camera just fully overheated and cut out. I really want to finish this video because I really am excited about this episode. So what I was saying was that that statue could also be symbolic of Aunt Lydia's place in Gilead being cemented and her being placed as a permanent fixture. There's no, we know from Handmaid's Tale already that Aunt Lydia is a pioneer in Gilead. She creates things so that she can survive. She created the aunts so she can survive. So nothing she has is given to her. Everything she has, she had to go and create. And we didn't see any statues of anyone. As a matter of fact, the statue in Washington, I think it's like Lincoln statue or something, I don't know, that was bashed, that was broken up, and so that's not a thing that Gilead does. So I think that statue is symbolic of her place being cemented in Gilead. So now Agnes is showing Daisy around the school, and she's showing her different classes, and for like the Bible class, she said, oh, this is Bible class, Daisy said like, praise be his words or something like that, and in her narration in her head, Agnes says weirdo. And that tells me two things. One, these girls aren't taught to be as strict with their language as people who have outside influence from Gilead are once they're in Gilead. And also, these girls have a sense of, or at least Agnes has a sense of, something about this is a little bit strange. You know what I mean? And so when she says that, that's very telling. And then we see a very uncomfortable scene where it highlights a mistrust that these girls are taught, because as soon as Daisy sits at the lunch table, they're now talking in the same like stiff, monotonous, robotic kind of way, and then they actually send her to go get ice cream so that they can talk freely, because they don't trust her. They don't trust any Pearl girl. So they're like, what punishment did you do to land yourself babysitting a Pearl girl, you know? And then we kind of see another side of Agnes that is very reminiscent of June, where she believes in justice and fairness. And basically Shunammite is telling her, you should tell on Daisy that she did something she didn't do, so they could get her before she gets you. And Agnes is like, you could see the hesitation on her, so that she does not believe. She even tells Shunammite, you're cruel, like, why would I do that, you know? And very June behavior, like fairness. June is not going to get somebody before she gets got unnecessarily, you know what I mean? She's not gonna do that. And June didn't raise her, so credits to Mrs. Mackenzie and Mackenzie's for raising her in such a way where she doesn't feel like she needs to get somebody before she gets got, unlike Shunammite. And I really want to know more about Shunammite's family and who they are, because why they made her so. And we also learned that Agnes is partially being raised by her Marthas, and as a result she learns a little bit about the world before Gilead. And so she asks her Martha, when she was expressing how worried she was about Becca getting married, she's talking to her Martha, and she asked her like, what was your husband like before, casually. So this is a topic of conversation she's accustomed to having. She knows about stuff from before. And then the Martha is telling her, we met in a bookstore while everyone else was meeting on like Hinge or Bumble and things, and she's like, what's Hinge, what's Bumble? I thought that was funny, and the Martha's like, that's something you'll never have to know about, which was kind of sweet. And then Paula comes in, and everybody gets stiff and everything. And then the scene with Paula just shows you just how cruel these women are taught to be, because for their own survival. Because Paula then starts asking the Martha, I forgot her name, if she's okay, because she was limping. If she said she's okay now. And basically that shows again what kind of society this is, because the Marthas have to maintain their value, their place in the home to be left alive. because that's why they were left alive, because they were somewhat godly, maybe unmarried, but like um Gilead does not believe in remarriage for women, so the women are not, at least not the women before Gilead. And if they never had kids or anything like that, they're made into, yeah, I think that's why they're made into Marthas, because they never had kids. There's no proof of their fertility. If there's proof of their fertility, they're made into handmaid. If there's no proof, then they're made into a Martha and made to take care of home and family and this and that. And they had to maintain that role or else. So limping, rain or shine, broke foot or no broke foot. So she lies about feeling better, and Paula tells the lady, well, I got some stuff for you to do on the 3rd floor, so go up there. So you know she's climbing flights of stairs with this bash up ankle, and we don't yet know what happened to her ankle, but she's clearly not okay. And then she turns to Agnes and says to her, when I was young, we used to ride horses a lot, and whenever a horse came up limp or lame, my dad would shoot it. And Agnes looks kind of like taken aback, and she's like, it's really a small mercy. And I'm like, this is how they view Marthas, by the way. Marthas are property to them, so her saying that is just casual. But like, you know, from like Serene and everything that happened in The Handmaid, that these women know better. They know better that other people aren't your property, and you don't have to force your belief on people. But of course that's not their reality, and so they go along with it because that's what their husbands are doing. This first episode also does a very good job of laying the groundwork for what happens in further episodes, because Agnes was agonizing over what might happen to Becca and saying that she might get a husband that doesn't allow her to have friends, she might get a husband that's moved far away, and all those things. Those are very direct things that come up later on in the show, so I thought that was really good. And then the next part of the episode gagged me, because I did not know they did this. I know they did this with handmaids, but they also do it with the little girls, with the plums. Where, and bear in mind, to be a plum, you would have started puberty but not had your period yet. So you would be maybe anywhere from 12, 11, 12, or even 10, 9 for some that start maturing a lot earlier. And you would pretty much be put in this plum uniform, and they are made to basically prepare for wifedom, and they don't spend a long time being a plum. If they get their period, they're green and they're gonna be wife post haste. So bearing in mind that these are little girls, barely teenagers, some might be like, because the world is in a state where fertility is low, it might be that they're getting their periods a lot later, 15, 16, but still little girls. And the fact that they were playing in the beginning tells me that they're little still. So with that in mind, it's like them being asked to do this is crazy, where the guy that was basically looking at Agnes lustfully was caught touching himself. And that's why I said he was the building block for a major plot point, and they focus on him a little bit just so you could watch this guy, right? And basically what happened was that they caught him doing that and at school, and they wanted to punish him, so they brought him into the dining hall of all places, and they basically asked the girls for their strength to boost them up to do this thing, and asked them like, you know, do you think they should go unpunished? And they also shamed them, the girls, for what the guy did. So basically saying, shame onto any girl who tempts a man. How they gonna tempt a man? They don't. Anyways, that happens, and they decide to take the hand. But it's not, in The Handmaid's Tale, the punishment seemed more surgical, where they would take them to a doctor to get a limb removed. For this, no, it's just straight up bang. So that's what they did with like a saw or whatever. They cut it off. Daisy sees this and is like, hell, what is going on? What is happening? What? Like all the girls are like screaming like, punish him by his hand, you know what I mean, like egging it on, and they're like gladiators, like warriors, and you're like, what is happening? And then you shift to like this intense scene where you see Aunt Vidal's face, and she is mortified because, like I said, she knows better. She's from the time before. She knows this is not right, but she's mortified of what they've grown these girls to be. And I was too. I was like, what the hell, actually? But yeah, that's what happened. So the girls are being taught that cruelty equals justice, and it's their fault for anything that happens to them. Any crime against them is their fault. For any way that they get hurt, it's their fault. And then we're going towards the end. So what I like drew from the end, because basically what happens is that Daisy is mortified by this. She runs from the scene, and Agnes chases her because she's in charge of her, and Daisy is like, they just took his hand, what the heck, Jesus effing Christ, Jesus effing Christ, what the heck? And she's on the ground, she's screaming, crying, throwing up, literally. And then one of the aunts come, but then Daisy realizes that she was like taking the Lord's name in vain and swearing and doing all this thing. So she was telling Agnes, like, don't tell on me, like, I'm sorry, don't tell on me. So Agnes doesn't say anything, and the aunt tells Agnes to take Daisy away and get her cleaned up. They're in the restroom now, and Daisy is like grappling with this. She just witnessed this, and she's like, they never told me that this would happen. Like, they told us about assemblies, but they didn't tell us it was like this. And Agnes is like what? And she's like, never mind, just thank you for taking care of me. And she's like, I have to confess that I swore and I took the Lord's name in vain. But it's like seeing what just happened over just something personal to a person. She was scared of what would happen to her. She's like, do you think they're gonna take out my tongue? And she's like, if it's God will, if it's God will. And she's boosting herself up, and she's like, I can't do this. No. And Agnes is kind of like, you don't have to do it. It can be our secret. Another act of rebellion, because remember, secrets lead to immorality, says Gilead. And so she's like, another secret. And Pinky promise and whatever. When they're walking out though, Daisy is still grappling with this, and at this point we don't know who Daisy is yet. We just know that she's a Pearl girl. She's grappling with this, and Agnes tells her, we'll pray about it and show contrition and we'll be okay. And she's like, okay. And Agnes gives us a narration that basically Shunammite was telling her, like, you can't trust Pearl girls, but that's exactly what she went and did, like trusted a Pearl girl. And then we shift to, now it's nighttime, everyone's going to bed. Aunt Lydia is walking through the hall where the Pearl girls sleep, and saying good night and may God watch over you, and she is going. We shift to Daisy. Daisy is in bed. She looks around, everybody's like asleep. She goes to the other girl's bed. She takes something out of the girl's bed base. It's a radio. When we hear on the radio, you hear, this is Radio Free Boston, and for all our Mayday heroes behind the land. You said what? Or who? Behind the where? Okay. And you could find on these channels, and she goes to the channel, and it basically gives code name. It's like Foxtrot. You have a package, not Foxtrot, but somebody, you have a package, and I don't know, Twinkle Toes, you just stay still, sit where you're at. And I think she's like, she was at the second one. It was her message to just stay still and keep doing what she's doing. And then she puts on the music, and basically that voice that you heard, the first voice that you heard was Tuello, and it's like, don't let the bastards grind you down. And then they play music, and basically they do that because Gilead does not allow music, but for anyone that can tap into, neither do they allow radios or devices or phones or anything like that, so anyone that can tap into the station will hear the music, because they don't do that anymore. And so that's really nice. And then she's listening to the music, and you're now seeing a flashback of her life in Canada, because she did say before that she's from Canada. She told the girls she's from Canada, but she renounced Canada. She said that Canada is full of sin and it's gonna sink, and she hopes God sinks it one day. And you know, she's riding like a scooter along a street, and then you see her walking to a shop, and walk past this lady, and then we see the lady's face and we see that it's June Osborne, and we're like, ah, Mama June. So yeah, that's how they introduced June, and that's how you see what Daisy is really about, which is, we know now she's working with Mayday. And basically it pans to another scene. I know this ending is very long. It pans to another scene where the last thing we see is Agnes, because she's the one telling the story, and she's back in her room, she's in her restroom, she has her underwear down, and we see that she got her period, and she's saying that, like, this story, she can't tell us the exact year because they weren't allowed to use calendars, but she can mark it by some birds or other that were starting to sit, so it was near spring because the nights were getting shorter. It's summer, the days are longer, the nights are shorter. And she said, you know, it's the time I became eligible, it's the time I got my period. I remember these things specifically, right? That's how it wraps up, with her looking out at the horses. And I mean, I went ahead and I watched the whole thing, but that is it for this breakdown, for this video. And I mean, I give the show so far 5 stars. 5 stars. Okay, it got me to sit down in front of this camera, it got me to plan out a video, sit down in front of this camera and talk. So 5 stars, because I just had to get it out. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this kind of video, if you do want to see more show breakdowns, or if you want to see book breakdowns or things like that, please remember to like, comment, and let me know, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.